All right, folks, let's continue with our discussion of Zeynep Tufekci's article from Wired Magazine. So in the last lecture, or in the last video, I talked about the fact that the threats to freedom of expression have changed from what we called the classical period to the contemporary period. In the classical period, those threats came in the form of choking off free expression uh, at the point where someone might access a particular form of media to share their views, their opinions, their ideas with the world. And in the contemporary period, I said there are no such choke points available, and the threats to freedom of expression have thus shifted to manipulations of trust and of attention, to disinformation and misinformation rather than to just blocking information or preventing information from being shared. So let's talk a little bit about what's changed that's brought about this shift in the threats to free expression, according to Tufekci. Uh, the first thing that we need to note is that we live in the information age. We are subject to an information deluge. There is just this constant barrage of information coming at us in all sorts of different forms. Sometimes this information is coming at us in text that others write for our consumption. Sometimes it's coming at us in the form of radio media or of television media, but most frequently it's coming at us in the form of social media and the internet. We are constantly bombarded with news stories, with headlines, with cat photos, with memes, with all sorts of information that is of varying degrees of value or usefulness to us. And we all have means at our disposal to share information, whether that be to pass along information that's been shared with us, or to share updates about ourselves, or to try to affect others' opinions by making arguments or trying to persuade them. We all have various means by which we can broadcast our own views, or amplify views that we agree with. Whether it be posting on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or Reddit or wherever, or building your own website or creating a podcast, or making TikTok videos. Right? There are so many ways. I mean, and also writing books or writing for newspapers or magazines, but so many ways in which we might get the opinions that we want to express out there for the world to see. And very few ways for those who might want to control the spread of certain kinds of information to prevent that information from getting out there. If they reach for one choke point and try to stop us from posting on Facebook, we can go to Twitter or Parler or some other app. If they reach out and prevent us from posting on all social media apps, we can still create our own websites. We can still manipulate Google's algorithms to ensure that our websites get seen. We can still post under pseudonyms or create fake accounts. Right? There's always a way around any form of censorship that might be tried, or direct censorship that might be tried. So we now see there are two sides of this. We're constantly bombarded with information, and it's very easy for people to spread information, whether it's good or bad, to get information out there. Let's focus on the fact that we are constantly bombarded with information. This changes our relationship to the information that's available to us. Uh, Historically, there's been a paucity of information available to us. There hasn't been that much around. And we could process pretty much all of the information that was being made available to us. We could follow up on it, do our own research, try to understand its value, try to understand if we should believe it or not. But that's not the case in the contemporary age. We have to figure out how to sort through all of this information. We have to figure out where to focus our attention. We have to figure out if we should focus it on the most recent bit of news that's coming out, or if we should focus our attention on the long form essays that are being written and the deeper stories that are being told, or if we should focus our attention on the sports scores that are constantly being updated, or if we should focus our attention on the newest memes that are spreading, or on the newest beauty tips that are spreading, like all of this stuff that's calling for our attention. We have to figure out where to focus it. And then once we've decided where to focus it, we need some heuristics for figuring out, or some rules of thumb for figuring out which bits of that information to trust. And that makes us eminently, these two facts make us eminently manipulable. It's easy for others to manipulate us by either attracting our attention and getting us, or controlling what we can attend to, getting us to figure out, or to focus on what they want us to focus on rather than what we think we should focus on, because we're just, we're constantly trying to figure out where to put our attention, and it's constantly shifting. And if something can grab your attention, can get hold of you and get you to focus on it, that's really valuable. And by manipulating who we trust and what sources we trust. Once someone has your attention, if they can give you reason to trust them and to distrust other sources of information, then they can manipulate you in a variety of ways. And one of the ways they can manipulate you is by blocking your uptake, your receptivity to other opinions or other information that's coming at you. So if I can control what you attend to and what you'll trust, then I can force you to attend to things that I want you to look at and to trust only sources I want you to see and trust, and convince you not to trust any other sources of information that might challenge what I'm putting out there. And now we can see how this functions as a kind of threat to freedom of expression, as a kind of threat to freedom of speech, because it's a tool by which dissenting voices can be effectively silenced. Though they're still able to speak, they're still able to broadcast their opinions, because we can't stop them from doing so. Their opinions land on deaf ears. Right? No one's going to pay attention to those dissenting views. So how do social media companies? Well, let's take a step forward here. We might refer to this feature of attracting attention, or of controlling attention and controlling trust, as the attention economy. As Tufekci puts it, here's how this golden age of speech actually works. In the 21st century, the capacity to spread ideas and reach an audience is no longer limited by access to expensive centralized broadcasting infrastructure. It's limited instead by one's ability to garner and distribute attention. And right now, the flow of the world's attention is structured to a vast and overwhelming degree by just a few digital platforms: Facebook, Google, which owns YouTube, and to a lesser extent, Twitter. They largely control what you are attending to, or what most of the population is attending to at any given time. And they make a science out of doing so. They control your attention first and foremost by tracking what you pay attention to, by tracking what you like, learning where you spend most of your time online, what kinds of articles or stories or photos or videos you click on, and they can then track what all of your interests are together and figure out how to advertise to you given those interests. They can sell your attention to advertisers to get their products in front of you. The second way they do this is by pulling you back in. They make an addictive product, a product that keeps tapping on your shoulder, keeps pulling your eyeballs back if you try to walk away. If you try to leave Facebook, you start getting more and more of these alerts through email telling you about things that your friends are posting or that others are posting that might be interested to you, and they try to draw you back in. They give you this endorphin rush every time you get a like or a comment on something you post, and so it keeps you coming back for more. Right? So they control to a large degree what we're paying attention to, and then they can decide what to put in front of our faces. Um, and they can sell that information to advertisers and political actors so that they can then put things in front of people who they know will attend to them. They can use what Facebook learns about you to figure out how best to capture your attention, how best to get you to pay attention to the things they want you to pay attention to. And the result of this is, as I said, that silencing voices in this attention economy happens not in the not in the usual ways. Right? It doesn't involve, as Tufekci says, meddling with trust and attention. Or, I mean, it does involve meddling with trust and attention, not muzzling speech itself. As a result, they don't look much like old forms of censorship at all. They look like viral or coordinated harassment campaigns, which harness the dynamics of viral outrage to impose an unbearable and disproportionate cost on the act of speaking out. They look like epidemics of disinformation meant to undercut the credibility of valid information sources. They look like bot-fueled campaigns of trolling and distraction, or piecemeal leaks of hacked materials meant to swamp the attention of traditional media. And not only do these social media companies control our attention, but they control the attention of the traditional media sources. Twitter itself has become news. Facebook itself has become news. They control what, and we saw this eminently with President Trump, what's happening on Twitter or Facebook controls what is going to drive the news story for that day. And that seems hugely problematic because it means that a small group of people, the people who have access to this data that Facebook and Twitter and others are collecting, can control what we're paying attention to and can use that to drown out other voices or to block uptake of other voices, of dissenting views or of news stories that might be really important for us to attend to. So the upshot of this for Tufekci is that the greatest threat to freedom of expression is not traditional censorship. It's not muzzling. It's not deplatforming. It's not even throwing someone off Facebook or throwing someone off Twitter. It's these forms of attention and trust manipulation that prevent people who are consumers of information from being able to attend to other information that might disrupt their views or challenge their views or force them to reconsider their views. Right? Functions by meddling with trust and attention, not by muzzling speech. And there's another important dimension to this, and that's that these information spaces are incredibly fragmented. Right? We're not all seeing the same thing. Ads and political actors can target specific audiences, and others just can't see what they're saying to them. We can't know what a particular political campaign or a particular company is showing their viewers, the people that they are targeting when they are advertising. Sometimes it gets out, sometimes we do get to see that, but we're not seeing all of the same information that they're seeing. And so it becomes even more difficult for those who would express a dissenting view to express that view to audiences that need to hear it. It becomes more difficult to challenge problematic speech because we don't know who's hearing that speech or exactly what that speech is, because of the fragmentation of these information spaces. Each of our online spaces is very different than anyone else's. So what's the solution? Is it more speech? That would be the line that classical liberals will push, and that someone like Mill would push, that the only cure for bad speech is more speech. Right? The famous American saying is that the best cure for bad speech is more speech, a paraphrase of Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. And as Tufekci says, this loses all its meaning when speech is at once mass but also non-public. How do you respond to what you can't see? How do you cure the effects of bad speech with more speech when you have no means to target the same audience that received the original message? So this is a problem of this fragmentation. But another problem, another dimension of this is that more speech doesn't necessarily counter bad speech. More good speech doesn't necessarily counter bad speech because bad speech can be used to create echo chambers, to manipulate the trust of those who are attending to it and who are hearing this speech, so that even when others express dissenting views, dissenting opinions, they won't give them the time of day. They're not going to listen to them. They're not going to hear them out in any way. And so they're not going to, that good speech, quote unquote, good speech, just isn't going to land. It's not going to have an impact. No matter how much more of it there is, it's not going to effectively challenge the bad speech that's out there if that bad speech holds people's attention and manipulates their trust. It creates echo chambers that they can't escape. So how do we counter it? Well, I think the next thing we need to note is that freedom of speech is not, in fact, an end in itself. Right? Freedom of speech is not intrinsically good. It is good insofar as it helps our democratic society function better, insofar as it's a means for oppressed or marginalized people to fight for their rights, insofar as it's a way of ensuring that our views are progressing, that our scientific understanding is progressing, that our knowledge, human knowledge, is making progress. As Tufekci says, it's an important democratic value, but it's not the only one. In the liberal tradition, free speech is usually understood as a vehicle, a necessary condition for achieving certain other societal ideals, for creating a knowledgeable public, for engendering healthy, rational, and informed debate, for holding powerful people and institutions accountable, for keeping communities lively and vibrant. What we're seeing now is that when free speech is treated as an end in itself and not a means, it is all too possible to thwart and distort everything it's supposed to deliver. When we say that there can be no reason for blocking speech, that freedom of expression is the primary and fundamental right of everyone in a democratic society, and that it is good in and of itself, just it's the thing that we must protect no matter what, then we allow bad speech to proliferate, speech that is in fact detrimental to a democratic society, that in fact prevents the growth of progress of human knowledge, that makes our communities less lively and vibrant and more reactionary and locked down. It's like allowing a cancer to grow within a democratic society. It's as if we are saying that growth by any means is a good in and of itself, and even if that growth is cancerous growth, we have there's no good reason to stop it, no good reason to prevent it. Right? That's the way we seem to be treating freedom of expression today, that it's a good in and of itself, and even when it leads to bad outcomes, we can't stop it. But Tufekci wants to say that's not how freedom of expression has typically been understood. And as we've seen for Mill, that's not how it was understood. It was of fundamental importance, but not valuable in and of itself. So what's the solution, according to Tufekci? Well, we have to decide democratically how to control this new public square. We have to figure out together how we're going to control these forces that currently manipulate our attention and our trust. How are we going to regulate social media companies that give advertisers and political actors these resources to manipulate us in this way? The solution, according to Tufekci, is going to be a political solution that puts forward a regulatory framework that controls the ability of these companies to manipulate us, the ability of others to use the information these companies gather, because really the companies themselves aren't interested in manipulating us except insofar as they can make money off of it. So it controls the ability of others to use these companies to manipulate and control us. That's the solution. Now, she doesn't go into detail here, but perhaps we could have a discussion about that sometime in the coming weeks.